All right, well, I think we're ready to go ahead and meet our players. Our first, from Brazil, please welcome to the stage, Rase. His opponent, representing Germany, please welcome to the stage, Viper.
I know Viper is a good player because German have a lot of great Hearthstone players.
I actually do not know that much about him as person. I know that he just was really regular in finishing ladder last year. He was good at playing tournaments.
I'm the only player in the world that qualified for the 3 Copa Americas.
Obviously, he's good at playing tournaments this year by making it so far. Going into the tournament, we knew our groups, we knew our opponents. So it was not easy to figure out, can I do something with this information?
Yeah, I just saw them today at the breakfast. I started talking to Viper.
What is this guy? What is he doing?
I don't have problems with talk with my opponent before the game because I will try to win against him anyway.
In the end, I try to not overthink it, to be honest. I try to just build a lineup I would play regardless of knowing who I'm playing. And now I'm happy with the lineup.
I didn't build my lineup thinking just about him because I need to try to win this whole thing.
If I win here, then I might just take a year or two off to play Hearthstone, to go all in on esports, which would be really nice and probably really fun.
If I won against him, I'm not feel bad. That's what I'm trying to reach, the victory.
Up next, Rase versus Viper!
Germany meets Brazil on the international stage once again, but this time it's Hearthstone edition. Rase from Brazil, Viper from Germany. You heard some of their opening thoughts here, Kibler. When we look at their deck list and the head-to-head, what else is on your mind here?
Well, for one, this is one of Race's best opportunities to win in his group. This group overall is pretty unfavorable for his lineup. He is the only player bringing Warrior in this tournament, and that Quest Warrior deck could be a little bit of a liability in some of these matchups.
That's right. It could be beneficial in some, but also very weak in others. Quest Warrior is a bold pick, and a lot of experts and analysts agree that Rase is unfavored based off the percentages. However, even though he is one of the lowest percentage chances to get out of any of the groups from the 16 players, this is his best chance. I looked at some of the statistics, and based off conventional archetypes, Rase is as close as it can get for 50-50 while still being unfavored. So Viper is the player for him to beat if he wants a really good chance of getting out of this group. If he loses here, it's going to be a very tough road to get past his other opponents.
Yeah, he has a lineup that's pretty strong against aggressive decks. He would really much have preferred to be in a group with, say, Killenday or Turna, as we were discussing in the pre-show. Right. You know, this Control Mage is very strong in those matchups where the AoEs are good. He even has Abomination in his Control Mage deck to help against those token Druids and odd Paladins. But against the more controlling lineups, those just really aren't that impactful. Here, for instance, against the Miracle Rogue from Viper, which, by the way, happens to be Viper's favorite deck,
yes,
is a deck that really needs time to set up to get to its big finishing turns, and the Miracle Rogue does not give you that opportunity. It has explosive potential in the mid game. Rase is going to need to use Arcane Artificer to build up armor while removing Viper's board and trying to contain his card draw from Gadget's and Auctioneer.
Yeah, there's not many really good matchups for Race's lineup in this head-to-head, but this could be interpreted as one of them. Miracle Rogue versus Big Spell Mage looks pretty even, but if you ask a lot of high-level players, the better you are at Big Spell Mage, the easier this matchup becomes for the Mage's side because you effectively have a removal game plan. You just try to exhaust the Miracle Rogue out of resources. They'll eventually draw way farther into fatigue, and if you can even get the Death Knight, you'll be able to just sit back on your laurels. You don't actually have to create an offense, just have absolute perfect defense.
And the Miracle Rogue these days is a lot more about creating a board with Faldori Strider. It's more about spider offense than it is about just that big burst finishing that many previous versions of Miracle Rogue have focused on. You do still have the ability to cold blood a Leroy and such, but you don't have the same explosive potential as with, say, Shadow Step in the past.
However, one of the cards that Sato highlighted very importantly is that Miracle Rogue does have the ability to steal matchups with really fast all-in plays. When we look at the Edwin Van Cleef being available to Viper here, turn 3 is very awkward for the Big Spell Mage. Their best access to removal tools are things like Voodoo Doll, which can get answered by, say, a Sap. So Rase doesn't really have many good options to answer this Van Cleef. It looks like he's going to at least take a hit or two here.
Yeah, this is actually something that we talked about a little bit before the broadcast yesterday. The early game removal from the control mages is so bad that even just playing a questing adventurer on turn 3 is often correct. That's one of the cards that, if you look at the statistics, often ends up being a below average card, but largely because people tend to try to protect it in the way that is unnecessary against the removal suite that exists for this mage deck.
That's right.
We look at Race's hand right now. He can't kill this Edwin Van Cleef until turn 6. And if that were a questing adventure, he'd be in a very similar situation. He just doesn't have any removal that's inexpensive.
That's right. No Polymorph, no ability to remove this Edwin, doesn't have Dragon's Fury. And now Rase, the thing about his play is that he dedicated most of his early game to this Edwin Van Cleef. So how does he choose to follow up? Is he going to continue to press in, or is he afraid of the Polymorph? That we see a lot of Miracle Rogues choose to be very aggressive, but then sometimes they pull back a little bit depending on how their hand is, and Viper does have things like Gadget and Auctioneer, so he doesn't have to necessarily continue to go all in.
Yeah, he has the ability to kind of play a half and half plan here. You know, he did expend those resources getting the Van Cleef down, but there's not really a sort of insistence that he goes in immediately here. He does have that Auctioneer. He doesn't have a preparation, though. If he had a preparation, that makes the Auctioneer much stronger. However, you know, without the coin, that still is pretty far away. So I could even see the draw to just eviscerate Coldblood here, push, what would that be, 12 damage this turn, and put Rase on a really fast clock. The problem is that you end up in a situation where you don't necessarily have the ability to finish that off, but
Wow.
Viper, he's banking on the fact that, okay, unless there's a Polymorph here, this is going to do 20 damage with this Van Cleef Coldblood.
That's right.
And at that point, there still has to be a Voodoo Doll. And Rase, very likely, if he had Voodoo Doll in his hand, may have just played it on turn 3 as well. There's no silence effect in his deck that would prevent a Voodoo Doll on 3 from being effective, so that would give Rase even more opportunity to get rid of it for cheap. And right now, it looks to be a call that will pay off for Viper, as this makes Meteor out of reach for Rase in terms of actually being able to kill Van Cleef before it ends the game.
Yeah, there's a lot going into Viper's read here. I think one, kind of what we're talking about. This is a very tough matchup for Miracle Rogue the longer the game goes. So ending it quick is of the utmost importance. 2, your opponent has mulliganed every card, shown very awkward plays and responses to it. He's even paused and hero powered the Van Cleef, showing signs of weakness. So Viper is going for this maximum pressure. Rase is so desperate that he's hoping these Arcane Artificers will stall out Viper's game plan just a little bit. Viper does not draw anything that will add a lot of damage this turn, but he does have continued board presence with that SI7 agent pickup.
If he does play the SI7 agent, that means that just a removal effect on the Van Cleef doesn't completely shut down his offense, but he is pretty close to all in at this point.
Yeah, so the big thing is you're worried about Dragon's Fury going into turn 5, and that's 10 armor for your opponent plus a guaranteed board clear, because the lowest that they would get is a Polymorph. So Viper looks like he's going to hedge just a little bit against the Dragon's Fury, go face for 10. Does he want to play the Firefly in this spot here, because it doesn't really add that much to it, and it does have a lot of combo potential with both SI7 Agent and the Vile Strike.
Choose soon.
It's kind of very awkward too for his mana, because Viper would love to be on the ability to like dagger up NSI, or be able to play these things with Vile Spine Slayer, but it's just very uncomfortable in the next couple turns here, and that's largely because of how aggressive he's been.
That look on Race's face, yeah, there's no polymorph, there's no Dragon's Fury, there is no way out for Race here. That Van Cleef, Xotl called it, card of the tournament. Well, already game 1 getting the job done.
That's right, and Miracle Rogue with this upset is a really big win, although, I mean, Miracle Rogue does have pretty good matchups against a lot of Race's lineup. So Race is going to concede here for sure. There's absolutely no way he can deal with this Van Cleef. And a very big win over for Viper's side.
You win.
So Viper goes up 1-0 here in what is probably a matchup that he's a bit favored in, but this is, as you mentioned, a particularly important game to win, as that was one of his decks that may have been vulnerable to that mage.
Well, the thing is that Race's best deck in this matchup is his Big Spell Mage, because against even Warlock, you have the Frostlich Jaina. Against the Mirror, it's 50-50, and of course, he banned the Shutterwalk Shaman. So it really comes down to whether or not he can take some of these closer matchups, like Miracle Rogue versus the Big Spell Mage. And again, Viper, fantastic recognition of the situation and the matchup, recognizing that I don't really plan on making this game go long. I have cards like Auctioneer, which I'm not even sure it's a very reliable option. And with Cold Blood, Van Cleef, and Coins in the backstab, like, it just tells you to go really fast onto the board. I can't blame Viper, and also he made a combination read with what Race's weak plays were in a full mulligan.
Yeah, and the fact that just understanding, okay, these are the removal options that are available to the mage deck. If I allow this game to go long, I allow all of the AoE to get online. I allow the Meteor that I saw from the Raven Familiar get online. So if you're able to push the game to end before that point, you just have such a big edge.
That's right. So that's game 1 in the books, where we're just getting started here between Race and Viper. So as we get ready for game number 2, let's get to know our players a little bit better.
I'm Rase. I'm from Brazil. I play Hearthstone. Before Hearthstone, I used it to play Pro Evolution Soccer, and I play it at the Worlds. I'm trying a lot to make it at Hearthstone too, so I will play Worlds at 2 different games. I'm a really competitive guy. I love to compete, I love to win, to be the best as I can. My family is amazing. Like, my parents always want the best for me, and my brother is the best. He's always cheering for me and crazy with my achievements. It's really cool to have a good support by my family. 2 South Americans playing this HCT, so I think we have a good chance to make it to the Worlds. I'm pretty confident, and I think Nalgidan should be too. It's the second time Nalgidan is playing this HCT. I hope I don't face him, because I really want both of us make it through the Worlds, like 2 Latin American playing the Worlds. It will be amazing, but if I need to play against him, I hope I win. I'm the only player in the world that qualified for the 3 Copa Americas, so I'm on a streak this year. I hope I can make it.
This year so far went really well for me. Last year, competitive Hearthstone didn't went too well for me. Even missed the playoffs, which was really unfortunate by like 1 point. This year I just want to prove people, yeah, I'm actually good at this game, and keep going with those little fancy lineups. I think my friends are already like happy with me, and they're just supporting me all the time. And my family is still kind of curious, like, is it worth it? Is our son just kind of wasting his time? Winning here would probably kind of make them, I don't know, feel happy and feel kind of safe. I think it's about me, that I just always want to be good at something. I always want to win, always want to be at the top of a leaderboard or something like that. So people can look at you, you can be the best, and yeah, winning is fun to me.
Viper's coming back to LA.
If I win here, then I might just take a year or 2 off to play Hearthstone, to go all in on esports, which would be really nice and probably really fun.
currently one game into this best-of-5 opening series of the Hearthstone Summer Championship. Rase is down 0-1, going to queue up the Mage again, this time against a matchup that is interpreted to be much better and favorable for him compared to the previous one. It is against even Warlock, one of my favorite decks of the current metagame.
This matchup is pretty good for the Mage deck because it does have more time to get that removal online. We talked during the Miracle Rogue matchup that you will often run into the problem of early Van Cleef, early Questing Adventure potentially, and that's exactly what happened in that last game. Against the Warlock, though, they can't play giant things. Well, they can play literally giant things starting on turn 3 with the right draw, but they have much slower ability to actually close out the game from that point. So if you're able to slow them down even a little bit with, say, a Doomsayer, which you see in Race's opening hand, that will give you much more time to get all that removal online.
Yep, Rase going to keep Twilight Drake a big threat to play against the big Spell Mage if they don't have turn 4, turn 5 removal. And also keeps the Blood Reaver Gul'dan, recognizing that sometimes the way the game pans out, you lose the ability to get any semblance of board if they get the Death Knight, so you simply don't play any minions on the board, and you hero power with the Blood Reaver Gul'dan, and that's how you ride the coattails to victory from there.
Yeah, and Race with a choice here between the Doomsayer and Familiar, pretty clear Familiar on this particular turn. You often want to play your Doomsayer going into their turn 3 or turn 4 because that can strand their Giant if you play it on 3, or their Twilight Drake if you play it going to their turn 4. It's a little bit awkward because of the Gen hero power, the opening up the Giant on turn 3, you don't have as clear an opportunity to play a Doomsayer to delay their development as against the typical Warlock deck.
Yep, there is a little bit of failure rate in this matchup if you get a Polymorph versus a 4-mana spell, but Rase is able to pick up a Flame Strike. And just keeping your hand size high is going to be really important as the big spell mage because they don't have that many draw tools compared to like the traditional control mages of the past. A couple of them do work in some more modern forms of card draw because of his lacking, like Novice Engineer, but Rase chose not to play that. Instead, he has Abomination as a way to destroy token druids, which are non-existent in his group for the most part.
Yeah, the sort of card draw in these decks, because they focus on being Dragon's Fury's decks, don't want to play Arcane Intellect, often is stuff like Stonehill Defender, or the Raven Familiar and Arcane Keysmith, things that you can develop in the early turns that give you options, give you the value of more than an individual card. Even though there aren't any class-specific powerful taunts in Mage, Stonehill is still something you can do in the early turns, but unfortunately for Rase, he does not have that here.
Well, he does have that Doomsayer step you were kind of mentioning at the very beginning to deny a turn 3 Giant or a coin 4 mana minion. Of course, the most threatening being Twilight Drake. And the big thing about big spell mages, too, or the thing is, rather, oftentimes when you set up these big AoE clears, you don't really have good follow-up plays, but he does with the Arcane Keysmith because that can also put a big wrench into Viper's plans with things like Mirror Entity as a potential threat check against his opponent plays.
Yeah, one really valuable thing here too, interesting note, there was no attack there from Rase. He chose not to attack with the Raven Familiar. That's due to the presence of Hooked Reaver. Hooked Reaver in the Warlock deck allows him to play 4-cost 7/7, which we have over the course of Hearthstone's history know how powerful that can be. So it is not in the best interest of the Mage to proactively damage the Warlock. You'd rather just sit back, force them to life tap for all their damage, and gain control and ultimately win the game with Alana or Jaina much later on.
Yep, here are some of the differences in this even Warlock version that Bunny Hopper's also playing. I spent a lot of time playing the Stubborn Gastropods. Turns out it's pretty useful against a lot of those early game plays that you don't really expect. Also, if you end up playing the Mirror, it's a very nice way to hedge if you don't have a Doomsayer early on. So you play a Stubborn Gastropod, and then your opponent can't play the Mountain Giant anymore that they want to. So it's very useful. And of course, Skulking Geist, Black Knight, those are just very good tech cards for the current metagame. Skulking Geist to destroy the Taunt Druid naturalizes, and then Black Knight, of course, against all the Lich Kings.
Viper choosing to use his coin to play a 4-drop that happens to deal with that Doomsayer, with that Spellbreaker, doesn't want to lose the tempo to having a 0 development turn. One of the powerful things about the Doomsayer into that turn as well is you can't even really effectively life tap because you end up with a full hand. So in order to get any value out of his turn, Viper essentially is forced to coin out that Spellbreaker, which does make Race's turn a bit more awkward. There's no easy empty board Keysmith like we were talking about before. It still is a powerful option to him because most of the minions in Viper's deck are quite large, so if he does hit a mirror entity, it can be extremely strong tempo swing.
It's true. Although with coin being used, any like spell secret being picked up here by the King Keysmith will be a lot better. Although Rase picks up a couple of awkward options. Things like Explosive Runes, not as effective against things like Twilight Drake compared to what they traditionally would be in other matchups.
Oh, Hearthstone account logged in somewhere else. So we're not gonna have to wait and find out.
The spectators may have messed up a little bit, but the game is still going on. Rest
it is, yes. So we got right back into it. Someone's trying to spectate too many games at once.
Yeah. And again, a holdback on the attack here from Rase, trying to play around those hooked Reavers, and we'll see if that ends up paying off, and most likely will, because Rase, his win condition primarily is Frostlich Jaina, and/or remove all threats and hope Viper can't launch a counteroffensive.
All right, so it was not the Vaporize. Viper checking for that and Ice Barrier.
So now it's either spells or minion-oriented secrets. And, you know, a handful of them can be problematic. Mirror Entity is, of course, on the forefront of Viper's mind.
Frozen Clone is also
Frozen
very
Clone,
strong.
Exactly.
Play
Yeah.
a powerful minion into it. So either of those is kind of scary. So from Viper's perspective, you know, okay, I want to try and play around Frozen Clone and Mirror Entity and Explosive Rune as best I can. There's kind of a catch-22 of you play a big minion, and it is the worst thing you can play into that Mirror Entity and often into the Frozen Clone. You play a small minion, okay, well, it gets blown up by an Explosive Rune. So Viper is going to go ahead and play the Drake and discovers, okay, well, it is not a minion-based secret, so now the spell-based secrets are what he's worried about.
Right. Skulking Geist completely useless against an even-based deck. Rase really needs that in, you know, in other matchups, just not this one. Does have an option to use Voodoo Doll right now to take the Twilight Drake off the board, and again, the life count will end up mattering if Viper ends up punting for a Blood Reaver Gul'dan finish as opposed to traditionally finishing it with big, strong mid-range minions like Mountain Giant and Twilight Drakes.
Yeah, there's a lot of big removal in the big spell mage deck. So he does have these two Voodoo Dolls in hand against quite a few big threats from Viper. But thanks to his decision not to attack, he has at least delayed the relevance of the Hooked Reavers. He's forcing Viper to activate his Hooked Reavers simply by life tapping, which means that it's going to take a lot longer. So there's only really the Drakes and Giants that are significant threats until Viper's able to get his life whittled down longer.
Rase has an opportunity to double trade to the Spellbreaker. He's clearly not trying to press his opponent's life total, and for good reason. Big Spell Mage doesn't have the Fireballs and the Pyroblasts to finish the game. Viper coming up on a pretty weak turn 5, all things considering. No Mountain Giant.
He is in the weird position that his threats are also the Shroom Brewers, which he would love to not have to use before he gets himself low enough to play the Hooked Reaver. He could just end up playing a straight-up 4/4 Hooked Reaver. In this matchup, you'd often prefer to use Shroom Brewer to heal up your minions that are damaged by AoE rather than heal your face. For instance, your opponent tries to use multiple copies of Blizzard into Dragon's Fury or Dragon's Fury into something to take care of a Mountain Giant. In that case, the Shroom Brewer is very effective at forcing them to use the individual high damage spot removal like a Meteor to actually take them down. So I wouldn't be surprised, given the context of this, to see Viper just play a 4/4 Reaver here.
Yeah, I like it. Shroom Brewer is kind of accomplishing the same thing, and look at him, heads up play to heal something that of no consequence, so he doesn't gain any life, and Hooked Reaver has a higher chance of going online. And I mean, I given that the hand context for Viper also had Blood Reaver Gul'dan and Dread Infernal, the Hooked Reaver was definitely not a bad option, but I think Viper sees it as potential later on the more he life taps.
The value of that Silenced Doomsayer. It's a great target if you don't want to heal yourself or your opponent with your Shroom Brewer.
So Rase's best play this turn is just the Skulking Geist, and I think that might be pretty valuable here because it does survive, Spell Stones, until it's fully upgraded just by its own attack. So it should be able to answer most of the board threat the next turn here with Flame Strike.
Yeah, and the secret's still up for Rase, and I believe that has been reduced to it is the Spellbender. And Viper doesn't know, maybe it's a Spellbender, maybe it's a Mana Bind, maybe it's a Counterspell. But regardless, there is concern from Viper's perspective as to how he will be able to deal with that.
This is a turn where you want to develop the strongest possible minion. That's just kind of what even Warlock does. It's kind of a modern take of what old Handlock used to be, where basically you just want to put out threats starting from turn 3 to 4 every single turn, and then if you need a finisher, which back then was Jiraxis, in this case it's Blade River Gul'dan, you rely on that as a plan B. But without your primary Mountain Giant and Twilight Drake plans, you're stuck with like getting Greymane and Dread Infernals, which has gotten a lot of criticism as a real card. Some players like Amnesiac were putting in like Argent Commanders because they wanted to push tempo that much more.
Yeah, the Infernals do give you a stronger game against, say, Token Druid or against the odd Paladin decks. But against other mid-range minion-based decks, you definitely prefer to have something else here. I think Viper may be like hedging his bets with the Dread Infernals. But Rase now picking up a Blizzard with a Flame Strike already in his hand. He does have the opportunity, if he wants, to Artificer Blizzard to soften these up and then potentially Flame Strike. One of the key things, as essentially always on HCT, these are open deck lists, which means the players know what the contents of each decks are, which means that Rase knows there isn't that much that Viper can do to deal with a Dragoncaller Alana board. So if he's able to set up a Dragoncaller Alana board, it essentially requires both copies of Hellfire or a Hellfire plus a Defile plus something else on the board in order to actually clear off all the dragons. So trying to potentially build toward that is potentially something that's on Race's mind. That's
right, and Viper still doesn't have confirmation on what secret guaranteed it is. So it still does kind of complicate whether or not Viper can use Spellstone versus just a generic spell AoE.
Reality. Whoa.
See how Viper plays into this Blizzard play. Very clear setup, and again, no attack from the Skulking guys. Now, people might be thinking about 8 added damage, but if that was the case, Viper could play a minion, tap, play the Hooked Reaver, or play a spell, perhaps. So this was all planned out from Reyes, and we'll see if that pays off, because right now, Viper still has some of his best threats coming with setting up for a Lich King and with Blood Reaver Gul'dan waiting in the wings.
Yeah, this turn is a little bit awkward for Viper, though, because he doesn't want to commit too much more if there is additional AoE that would simply die to that AoE. He is still afraid of the threat of potential counterspell from that secret. So if he does use any of his spells, like Hellfiring here, doesn't really do much. He kills his own guys to take care of that Artificer.
It's not exactly
so maybe he wants to use the Shroom Brewer to heal something up here in order to get out of range of more AoE, but that's not that effective either, because at highest he has a 5 health minion that's going to die to Flame Strike plus an attack from the Arcane Artificer.
Needs to dump a card, though. Doesn't want to miss out on a chance of getting a bigger threat like Mountain Giant. So Viper plays 6 Swamp Ooze, not going to be useful whatsoever. No life tap either, so very strongly indicating he's going to play the Lich King next turn to free up hand space. So Rase with double single target removals and Voodoo Doll and Polymorph will be sure to keep that in mind.
I mean, this is clearly a fantastic opportunity to use a Flame Strike here. Gets 7 armor from it and clears off all but that Gen Greymane. Now there's actually a kind of an interesting opportunity here, because Rase has just not been attacking with the Skulking guys. He could choose to trade that off and keep the armor gain, but he does want the Skulking Geist as a threat in play once he does decide to go offensive, or just a body on the board to help trade into Viper's minions.
I mean, he may never go on the offensive based off the way this game is panning out, because Viper, basically this has just become a game of cat and mouse here. Viper's trying to just chase Rase down to a position where he's cornered and hopefully outvalue him with resources and overwhelming tempo, but Rase still has threat checks for the next couple of minions here. It'll come down to whether or not Viper can perhaps set up a good Blood Reaver Gul'dan turn is whether or not Rase can answer that will be the question.
Yeah, that is really what this is going to be all about, is can Viper just win the game with the Gul'dan if Rase either doesn't set up the Alana, though there's a Doom Pact, so that means the Alana plan is kind of out the window. So Rase needs to find Jaina in order to actually be able to keep up with Viper's ability to pressure him with Blood Reaver Gul'dan once he actually gets to 10 mana.
True, although I feel like out of all the Death Knight cards that can come from the Lich King, Viper would much rather have some of the other options. Something more offensive like Army of the Dead is just insane in even Warlock.
It is, but out of context, I agree with you completely. But given the fact that Rase is essentially in a position where he may have to rely on Dragoncaller or Alana to win if he does not find Jaina soon, I think that's a fine insurance policy for Viper.
Okay.
It's certainly the weakest card in a vacuum in this matchup, but I think in context, it gives him a failsafe against the key card in Rase's hand. This is a bit of an interesting decision for Rase here, you know, exactly which removal he wants to use. Meteor is the least efficient overall for killing one minion, and also the worst if he does get to the Jaina stage of the game. So it looks like that is what he decides to fire off. Still not going on the offensive here.
I think there's a lot of value in holding on to a Polymorph to shut off the potential threat of demons coming back as well. So, you know, Rase keeps Polymorph. It's a cheaper removal option, so he can pair it with a lot of other cards if needed. And also because it has a lot more upside. Meteor tends to get a little clunky, but against the the Even Warlock, they do tend to play minions that can get splashed by the AoE with a bunch of 4/4s. So Meteor plus Ping often deals with 2 threats. This is starting to get a little bit frustrating for Viper, where it's just, you know, Rase is keeping Viper in this zone, but with Blood Reaver Gul'dan on the horizon, I think the game plan can be accelerated pretty significantly here for Viper. But he hasn't played that many demons. In fact, has he played a single demon that's died?
No, there has not been a single demon on Viper's side. And interestingly, he's choosing to play the Geist here rather than the Infernal. This is interesting because if he is trying to set up for a Gul'dan turn, obviously the Dread Infernal would give him an additional body at that point. I wonder if that's intended to make his Defiles or Hellfire better in some combination later on.
Yeah. It might force a card out of Rase. It also gives Viper a clean opportunity to set up double demons, for example, next turn if he just wants to present a bigger threat. The only downside is I do find that life tapping in the mid stages of this game is a double-edged sword. It helps you keep up with resources, but if the mage answers you threat for threat, what I found is that I just dig myself deeper in fatigue, and I have less turns with Blood Reaver Gul'dan to end the game.
It's true, though at this stage you may be just trying to race to your own threats before they get to Jaina.
Yeah, that could be a point. I mean, who knows? Maybe Viper ends up playing Blood Reaver Gul'dan just to get the hero power down because he may recognize that Rase will just continue to answer his threats. The problem is, though, Rase doesn't have that many cards. He has to really make do with what he has right here, right now.
And we talked about this at the very beginning of the game. One of the issues with Big Spell Mage is they don't have access to the traditional card draw tools of a lot of Control Mage decks with Arcane Amulet. He plays nothing.
Plays nothing. Not even a courtesy bump on the opponent's Doomsayer. Interesting. So the Stubborn Gastropod allows Viper to also tap in this turn because he can play, you know, say the Dread Infernal, Stubborn Gastropod, and Life Tap. And I don't know if he wants to dig too much deeper, but he still has yet to hit his best minions that aren't demons, which is Mountain Giants.
Possibilities.
Maybe he just plays double demon and tries to play Blood Reaver Gul'dan once his opponent removes it, which seems to be inevitable at this point.
Yeah, by playing a pair of demons at the same turn, it makes it so that you are more likely to have at least one of them not get hit by a polymorph effect. But that's not the plan for Viper here. He is looking to continue tapping.
Yeah, and I guess it makes sense too because he's committed to this point.
Is Jaina. And that is a very important card. It is the most important card for Rase at this stage of the game. He has gotten far enough that he has survived the early onslaught. Now, with a Voodoo Doll and a Polymorph in his hand, he has the ability to shut down so much of Viper's offense and generate an offense of his own. And that's what he's needed at this point.
Okay, now we're starting to see some fireworks here. If Viper was able to get this a turn earlier, though, it'd be significantly different because he'd be able to put a lot of pressure, develop even more threats, and then Rase would have to be stuck in a position where he only can develop one water elemental, it can get answered, and Viper can push damage. Now, it might still be a little bit too slow, but Rase still has answers, and he has a lot of life to play with.
And Viper, just by tapping, is getting himself down. He is at 17, so there is the opportunity for Hook Reaver to come down next turn as a 7/7, so just a single life tap.
Sun Fury just to free up his hand space at 10 cards.
Shields
Saw a Blizzard already. Saw a
Shields up.
a Meteor as well. So he's separating his threats right now. Dragon's Fury could be so big.
There's one polymorph remaining in Race's deck that is the potential downside of Dragon's Fury here. Other than that, everything else is at least 5 damage.
He also does have alternative plays. Stonehill Defender plus polymorph removal is an option as well.
And the polymorph is targeted at the demon.
Yep. This is kind of what we're talking about, shutting off the power of the reload with Blood Reaver Gul'dan. Willing to accept 5 damage on the board.
Well, Viper picks up an answer for that Stonehill Defender.
Yes, and the Abomination. Countered. Viper now can develop the Hooked Reaver.
The Homunculus also gives him another way to get a demon into play, as well as triggers that Spellstone to upgrade it.
Yeah, but he can't Spellstone this. Well, he can Spellstone this turn, but he can't get everything he wants because of the mana limitation. He would have to gain too much life, and the Hook Reaver would be out of range. All Viper has to do in his mind is to set up a chain of threats where Rase can't develop behind it, and force Rase into this really poor chess game. Oh, the Spellbender finally coming into play here. Something that we still haven't talked about in a few turns.
And well, now Viper gets the answer.
Big makeup.
Viper gets the answer as to what that secret that has been in play for so long actually was. Okay, second Dragon's Fury picked up. So I believe there is a Polymorph and a Meteor and a Blizzard remaining in Race's deck for spells.
Still variable, but Race still has good options here. First, he can guarantee a Water Elemental by trading into the Sun Fury Protector and hero powering his own minion. Then he can set up Stonehill Defender to try and find ways to soften up the board, maybe even pick up a threat of his own. Stonehill Defender sometimes just gets like a giant Mastodon, for example.
Or another Stonehill Defender.
Stonehill Defender number 2.
Protected from Black Knight. He has 2 Stonehill Defenders.
Insurance. I mean, the reason why Stonehill Defender, I think, is in this deck, too, is not only to soften the board, but just to give you things to play. And Sleepy Dragon is one of those cards. He looks like he wants to pick up the Sentient Shield Master. That just fits well with, like, Dragon's Fury, so I don't blame him here.
Also, just with the knowledge that your opponent's deck contains Black Knight, spending your entire turn playing an individual minion is just not going to get the job done.
Good point, good point. Well, Black Knight's been waiting.
Only a turn. Only a turn.
That's true.
So many possibilities.
And now Viper is down to 6 cards remaining. He doesn't have much time left for this Blood Reaver Gul'dan to even have much of an impact. So looking at it just from a bird's eye view, Viper has a very slim chance to make a comeback if it goes into fatigue. So he might have to get started maybe even as soon as like right now, but he has no real demons coming back. He's hoping to get to his Mountain Giant number 2, perhaps. I think the fact that Rase has Frost and Jaina anchoring him turn after turn is just too much.
Yeah, the clock is really on for Viper here. He's the one who has the onus of ending this game. If Rase has Jaina, he has 8 more cards in his deck. So the longer this game goes, the better it is for him. But Viper is still, I think, trying to find an opportunity to play his Gul'dan at this point that will give him a demon. I think he's trying to get a bit more value out of it. So hoping to get this Reaver back. He didn't play the homunculus, so I'm a little curious about like the exact plan that he has going on here.
Yeah, he didn't want the easy water elemental trade, I think. If
Sure, yeah.
He just wants
fair.
The real hard thing about any of these turns for Viper is that almost any minion you play could somehow be converted into a water elemental on your opponent's side. And Rase does have a way to kind of, navigate this turn by expecting a bad outcome by using Dragon's Fury. If you hit the Polymorph, you end up getting a really nice ping on the Black Knight after you trade in. And it's a guaranteed clear no matter what. The only downside is that you don't get the water elemental. So Rase chooses to use the Flame Strike, and I think I like that even better because Flame Strike's not super great against anything that Viper has. He doesn't have a really big board coming back from Blood River Gul'dan, and you still have Dragon's Fury to fit the curve.
Well, the giant that Viper has been looking for does show up a little bit late. Doom Pact can clear off this water elemental.
I don't know how many more impactful cards Viper has in his deck besides the second Hooked Reaver. Second Hooked Reaver, second Twilight Drake.
There's a Hooked Reaver, so he is down a threat.
I mean, in Viper's mind, he just needs one of these to stick.
There's also just the opportunity. Oh, there's a Polymorph. There's also still the opportunity for Rase to potentially just slam Alana, because if he just plays Alana at this point, Viper has to exactly double Hellfire or Hellfire Defile. But yeah, there it is, and Jaina came just in time to turn the corner for Rase here, and he is now evened up the series 1-1.
Yeah, big win here for Rase. Needed to land a favorable matchup, got it, but that is probably the easiest he'll have all series long, unless he's able to have Quest Warrior line up against a big mage. That's another good matchup for Rase, but they're far and few in between. Viper is generally favored across the board here, ever so slightly. And again, the reason why we emphasize this is because it is a double elimination group. So if a Rase beats Viper, he has a chance of potentially beating Viper again should he not be able to win the winner's match. And based off the way Tonsoku and Shao Ti built their lineups, it's going to be very difficult for Rase to overcome them, but not undoable.
Yeah, and here, what I want to see is that Warrior deck. I think that the Quest Warrior deck from Rase, it is unique in the tournament, both in terms of class and in terms of archetype, but it's kind of unique overall because it is a Shield Bearer Quest Warrior deck. Yeah. He is not playing the high end you typically see in Quest Warrior. He doesn't have any copies of Primordial Drake, nothing like Lich King. His goal is just get the quest online as fast as possible, and that hopefully will give him the power he needs to go over the top of those other control decks.
That's right. It's a very interesting metagame, quite possibly one of the most, if not the most diverse meta we've ever had, both on ladder and in tournament. And we had a chance to sit down with players and talk to them about the metagame. This is what they had to say.
The Hearthstone Championship Tour continues. It's go time! This is the 2018 Hearthstone Summer Championship!
When I was building my lineup, I realized that the meta is changing, like big mages appeared and big mages counter Warlock, and Taunt Druids is good against Warlock, Priest is good against Warlock, so I don't think Warlock is that good at this moment. That's why I didn't bring it. I'm bringing Combo Shaman because I think it's a really strong deck at this control field. Then I'm bringing Taunt Druid because Druid is OP. If you ramp and have a good early game, you are always on a good spot. I wasn't expecting just me to bring Warrior, like I was expecting at least 1 or 2 people bring it too. But my Quest Warrior is a really different version. I'm playing some 1-mana taunts to complete the quest faster. I'm playing Azalina because you empty your hand faster too, and it's always good to get some refill. I think if I do well with it this tournament, a lot of people will start to play it. I hope it works.
Some people just go by, okay, it's a mathematical problem. There's always one answer that's the right answer, the right call, the right decks. But figuring it out is not easy. And I'm probably one of the guys that wants to do something different, not just go with everyone expects, try to counter, try to beat what people bring.
Viper takes it 3-2.
A lot of people made like those statistics about who's gonna make it out of groups, who's gonna win and so on. And they just took HSV play, stats and decks and whatsoever, but playing control decks like Mage, Shadowbox Shaman and so on, if you play them well and you face the matchups you want to face, they are like way better compared to the statistics you're just gonna get by looking at ladder. I cannot bring the same stuff as everyone else and then expect to win. I have to do something different to overcome them.
With the casters!
Good way to pass the time while you're waiting for Shadowwalk animations to resolve.
I kind of just like stare off into a daze when that happens, honestly. And I kind of come to about 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, I lost. Oh.
Read War and Peace, maybe just write it down word for word, just scroll through the dictionary, get from A to about M.
Take out your phone and boot up Hearthstone on your other account.
I actually wouldn't know a good way to pass the time when there's Shadowwalk combos going on because I normally just press concede and walk away.
Or eat snacks, one of the two. You can pick one or the other.
Can it be both?
Yeah, you got two hands. One here, snack here, phone here, and then that guy starts playing Shadowwalk. And then what do? I don't know. 2 snacks, 3 snacks? You take your iPad, you boot up Hearthstone on that. Then that guy's playing Shadowwalk, and by that time, hopefully the first one's done. Just an infinite loop.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Summer Championships. No Shadowwalk Shaman this series, as it's been banned away, and we also have a schedule to maintain. But we do have Quest Warrior that Rase did mention. Now, Kibler, I really hope it comes out here and Rase is able to prove the haters wrong. And this is a matchup, or this is a head-to-head where Quest Warrior might actually be able to shine if it's able to match up against the big Spell Mage. But it does have a trickier time against even Warlock.
The games begin.
Looks like we're going to go to Big Spell Mage versus Taunt Druid. This is kind of exactly why people are showing that Taunt Druid might be of a risky pick for this tournament, even though it's so prevalent on ladder, and a lot of people are touting high win rates with it. It does struggle in an environment like this when everyone's playing things like Big Spell Mage, there's even Shamans in the mix. All those polymorph or transform effects really mess up your witching hours.
Yeah, it's not only just polymorph, but also the Skulking Geist. We saw Skulking Geist in
really good too.
A number of decks so far. You know, Viper and Rase were both playing it in that last game. Neither deck with any 1-cost spells, but a lot of important 1-cost spells, most notably Naturalize in the Taunt Druid deck that the Skulking Geist can remove and shut down your combo potential.
Yes, and you know, the thing about these control matchups, I love what Viper was saying during the break, and I hope you guys got a chance to hear it. He was saying that there's a lot of data out there now on statistics. They go to like HS Replay or they use Vicious Syndicate, etc. And they're very data driven with how these matchups being played. But a single tech card these days have the power to even change an unfavorable to a favorable matchup. You put in Skulking Geist, you put in a Black Knight, you put in, you know, whatever you want. Tankmaster Overspark, for crying out loud, is starting to make its way into decks. And then all of a sudden it becomes a favorable matchup, even though the percentages show that you're unfavored in traditional sense.
Yeah, and Taunt Druid is one of the decks that is most hit by some of those because it is built around a particular combo that involves Witching Hour bringing back Hadronox. And like I mentioned, Tankmaster Overspark, just turning any random minion into a 1/1 cheap or a 5/5 Devilsaur ruins that synergy. You know, you have a chance of breaking up that entire combo. So while the Taunt Druid deck has a lot of staying power, it is very fragile against the right cards.
Yes. That being said, as much as Rase is going to be hating his life if it comes down to the Witching Hour and hoping that you get Hadronox back versus the Sheeps, we have seen Taunt Druids win despite that. It's just the first wave or two of taunts. You get like a couple of Sleepy Dragons and Dragon Hatchers to stick. You can end the game with Branching Paths right there. Or if not, then you still have the first Hadronox wave. And if your opponent can't deal with that, sometimes that's good enough to win anyway.
But that's not the hand Rase has. Rase has a hand that has both copies of Witching Hour, some removal, and no ramp at all. So he is in a very difficult position there.
That's right. So we'll see. You know what exactly is the issue? As Viper has raised his hand to check on the state of the game, but this is again a part of the reason why taunt druids in general were so looked down upon when they were preparing for deck lists, and why a lot of matchup percentages tend to favor those who can beat the taunt druid with big spell mage, for example, which might be a deck that overperforms. And it's interesting that Admirable and Sotto were calling it, quote, a bad deck in the pre-show, maybe, you know, a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Do you think Big Spell Mage is a bad choice, or do you think actually the opposite, and agree with TJ? Do you think it's an excellent choice?
I think it's a vulnerable deck. I think it's a deck that has definite holes. It's very weak against Shudderwalk Shaman, for instance, but if you are able to build a lineup that can use its ban on Shudderwalk Shaman, I think you have a much better shot. But we are back into the game here, and Viper with the Keysmith, which is one of those cards that does give the deck flexibility. You know, Keysmith allows you to pull out secrets that you otherwise might not see, like a Mirror Entity. Mirror Entity is a card that in a controlling style deck you pretty much would never play. But you have the opportunity to take the choice of Mirror Entity or perhaps an Ice Barrier against more aggressive decks, which makes the Keysmith a much more versatile card that allows you to use those more effectively.
It wouldn't be a mage deck without some mage shenanigans, Kibler. You know, we can't play Primordial Glyph. We lost Cabal's Tome from the rotation, so I guess we got the Arcane Keysmith and the Big Spell Mage because it doesn't violate any of our rules. And some of the secrets, like you said, are very valuable. Not to mention, this is the most condensed the secret pool will be until next rotation. So Arcane Keysmith being a very underrated card, I think. A lot of people just thought, meh, it's like a decent value, but in this deck, it shines brilliantly.
Well, you don't want to play any cheap spells. You don't want to play, all that many. Ooh, I forgot this was in Race's deck here.
Greedy package for sure. And I mean, this is partial read too. That maybe I'm going to be playing against other taunt druids, so I have to be even greedier. And that's where you see some of the lineup differs. Race has a lot of good anti-aggro tools, but he also has some of these cards that are trying to bust matchups. We mentioned Abomination against Token Druid, and this is another one. Spear Stinger Umbra for greed packages against control decks.
Yeah, we talked a little bit with Race before the tournament, and he said that he recognizes that he has some difficult overall matchups from a deck lineup perspective, but that he's looking to make some of his decks just killers of particular decks. He wants to have the greediest version of the Taunt Druid deck. And he has the Taunt Warrior deck, which can really smash aggressive decks with all the whirlwind effects, and has the ability to just turbo out to the quest against control. So he may not necessarily have the overall best matchup percentages widely, but can really have big edges in specific matchups if they line up properly.
Well, Viper not panicking under the threat of the Spear Singer Umbra, and he doesn't really have much option. He had Dragon's Fury or Doomsayer, and I think Doomsayer is a much better choice, considering that the big death battles that you are afraid of are Carnivorous Cube and Hadronox themselves. Everything else is nothing. Otherwise, it's just a vanilla 3-4. Now Race can choose to play into that. He can kind of toss more minions into the pool with a second Oaken Summons. Also knows that the secret is not some counter spell because he tested for it last turn. And important to note that Race only has that other Ironwood Golem left. Since he's drawn one, he would thin out his deck, get him closer to Master Oakheart, get him closer to potentially finding combos for the Hadronox in hand. Choose instead to pass. I mean, it's tough to justify throwing minions into direct removal with the mage anyways. And it's not like Viper usually develops on 6 significantly outside of Skulking Geist.
Yeah, not really much for Viper to do here. The Gluttonous Ooze not really an offensive powerhouse. But his goal here is not to put on pressure. It's not to force Race to deal with his threats. So that's actually a little bit of what makes his hand kind of awkward right now, is he has 3 big finishers, whereas what he wants ultimately in this matchup is polymorph. He wants as many polymorphs as he can get his hands on in order to try to most effectively disrupt Witching Hour. If he does get that Lich King down, it can be a problem if Race doesn't have a board, because outside of a Naturalize, that's a difficult card for him to remove efficiently.
Yeah, Viper really planning out his next few turns here. How does he best set up for Lich King? Does he need to play Sindragosa instead? How is hand size look if he ends up not playing this Gluttonous Ooze? You know, I think a lot of those factors come into mind here. Even though it looks like a fairly obvious play, Viper is very clearly looking about his next few turns. Speaking of next few turns, how does Rase get all of this mana out of his hand? It's so jumbled.
How can I hold all these mana costs? Yeah, it is a very awkward draw from Rase. He has not found either Wild Growth or Nourish. So he has, you know, just the same amount of mana to work with that Viper does, and that's not how you intend to play this kind of matchup. You're looking to gain a mana edge and accelerate out your threats, make it difficult for them to deal with them. But playing mana for mana with the Big Spell Mage, as just mentioned, you know, the Lich King can just come down, and that's a problem for you.
That's right. And, you know, the cards that come from Lich King are also the follow-up threat. You know, the Frostmourne, being able to potentially even snipe the Haginox, or just big taunts and summon it back. Then you have to deal with those big taunts. You can't put on pressure, and then your opponent has time to draw into Frost Lich Jaina. You have a bunch of really good options at your disposal with Death Knight cards. It is interesting that this leaner version of Dragon Big Spell Mage has started becoming popular. I think I first saw Frozen do well with it when he was posting the deck list. I'm sure a lot of people were finding success as well. Considering that Frozen was one of the people kind of putting it on the forefront of the World Champions along with Sintalul in that semifinals that we all remember.
How are you defining the leaner version?
Because some people put in like a lot of greedier cards like Alex Strauss and then they play like Novice Engineer to help lean out the deck a little bit more. But they use like the Lich King as their top end threat, which is not something that we saw for a while with the Big Spell Mage.
Yeah, Lich King's an interesting card in control decks because there's a lot of potential Death Knight cards that aren't really that good for you.
Right.
One of the things that is interesting about Lich King is the ability to just get a Death Grip and potentially just straight up beat like a Shudderwalker Hadronox deck by stealing their threat. And it sounds like it's like, oh, this incredibly low percentage thing, but in a very low percentage matchup, having a low percentage way to beat them is actually often very good.
Right.
And specifically against Shudderwalk, that's definitely the case. This matchup, you don't need to hit their Hadronox with a Death Grip in order to have a great shot. All right, well, the Mirror Entity finally gets triggered.
Yes.
That is, interestingly enough, not going to be able to attack for Viper unless he finds Jaina or a Arcane Artificer before it leaves play. So probably never going to get to attack, just going to be a 3/6 on the board.
Viper has the Lich King as his best immediate play, also has Sindragosa available, and then kind of weighing both of those options here. The nice thing is that because you have a taunt, Sindragosa is kind of protected a little bit, but the Lich King just give you cards that can potentially swing the game right here, right now. If he gets a Death Grip, like you mentioned, steal the Haginox, that could be game-ending. Doom Pact also not that bad if it ends up going to a fatigue scenario against your opponent. Considering that Taunt Druid sometimes can just run away with the board, but he does have so much AoE that I don't imagine that he needs that Doom Pact anytime soon.
But from Race's perspective, now, okay, can I afford to leave this Lich King up? He does have the Primordial Drake. He can just throw away his trees into the Lich King and play the Drake to clear off. Does put him in a situation where he has a reasonable board, but again, he needs to try to dig to actually have those big plays. He really wants the Lich King of his own and have that not get polymorphed, and then be able to bring back Lich King with Hadronox and generate a bunch of bonus cards. But this game has not been going the way that Race has hoped.
The alternative form of removal is what? Swipe? Oh, that just doesn't feel very good. I like the Primordial Drake. And who knows, maybe your opponent's only afforded him removal for the Primordial Drake. You might bait out like a Voodoo Doll or something. You might be able to use even a bigger threat like Sleepy Dragon to follow up. But with so many cards in hand from the Big Spell Mage, I don't anticipate Viper being able to not have a really good response to this.
Yeah, Viper's just had so much time because there has been no mana ramp from Race. He's just been able to assemble a hand full of both threats and answers. I think his Dragoncaller Alana is like 0 now still. He hasn't even played an AoE. 9 mana, 3/3. Your turn.
He's kind of run into hand space issues too with Sindragosa. Plus Sindragosa gets a lot better with the Frost Lich Jaina. So I guess Viper can play smaller things with the Raven Familiar Arcane Keysmith let his opponent play more into the board, utilize the Ironwood Golem as defense. Then leverage things like Meteor and Blizzard a little bit better against your opponent's board.
There's also just not necessarily a rush to kill this.
It's true.
Ooh, Frozen Clone is interesting, though again, there is the hand space concern.
He does have Raven Familiar, which most likely will draw. The Taunt Druids do not play things like Ultimate Infestation traditionally. At most, they usually play one copy. In this case, there is none.
Well, there's a Nourish. Right when
better late than never.
0 rip possibility from it.
Yeah, I mean, this is an opportunity for Rase to just kind of develop his dragons. Doesn't have Master O card, doesn't have any way to combo with his Hadronox. And of course, Rase has hand space issues, so he can't draw for better cards like you were talking about.
I mean, I think this turn is likely his best opportunity is just Sleepy Dragon go. You know, kill the Iron Golem.
Just play directly into a second mirror entity. I guess it's not the end of the world because Sleepy Dragon's very bad against other Sleeping Dragons. It just takes forever to die.
You also just barely have any cards that are good to play into Mirror Entity. It's not like you can play a Hadronox into Mirror Entity. Yeah. You're playing a deck that is almost exclusively large minions, so you kind of hope, okay, I hope this isn't Mirror Entity, and if it is, you know, rough beat.
Yeah. Test for Counterspell first, perhaps? Does not. Plays directly into it, but sees that it's explosive runes, and I think Rase is pretty happy to see that. Yeah. Tough turns. Just because of the secret implications and how the games will pan out. You kind of wonder, if I give my opponent this 4-12, do I shut off any aggressive possibility? And it looks like Rase has survived that for now.
You know, Viper, he is in a position where he can clear off this board if he wants with some form of AoE. He could even just play the Keysmith plus Flame Strike, gain some life, trade one of his guys in, get a little bit of damage in. That does, you know, set up his Dragon Caller to be 1. But as we mentioned, he kind of wants to get cards out of his hand in order to actually use Syndragosa if he chooses to. The Flame Strike's a pretty low impact card overall in the matchup, because almost all of the minions are big. So getting an opportunity to use the Flame Strike to clear off most of the body of that Sleepy Dragon isn't a bad opportunity.
I think it's a good point. You dump 2 cards, so Syndragosa will be online next turn, so that way you don't overdraw. And like you said, Flame Strike is really poor against a deck whose lowest health minion is 6.
Right.
So yeah, really good points all around. And hey, you even get to chip in a little bit to that armor count.
Boom.
I mean, that might seem like we're saying it facetiously, but it might matter, you know, just getting a little damage. I've seen, you know, big spell mages go really deep into fatigue, and sometimes just die because they, you know, the druid has so much armor.
Yeah, and Rase now, he picks up a Naturalize, so he could Hadronox Naturalize here. That puts him in a position because there has been no Polymorph cast. The Hadronox Naturalize, he could then Witching Hour the following turn. Doesn't actually have a way to Witching Hour and kill the second copy of Hadronox, and he also doesn't have that many good dead taunts. There's no Lich King as part of the pool. There's just the Sleepy Dragon, Primordial Drake, and then Iron Golem, I believe.
Right, and with Spearsinger Umbra, that's one less card to activate that Witching Hour.
Right.
In the event where he was able to be fortunate enough to avoid Polymorph and revive Hadronox. You could also just start off with Cycling, the Wild Growth. I wouldn't hate that per se. But now it seems like Rase wants to push the issue. Says, I'm going to hope that you don't have Polymorph and this doesn't draw you Polymorph.
Well, the thing is that the Polymorph is Drum Jaina.
And it's still a pretty threatening wall taunt.
It's a lot of stats, and the Sleepy Dragon in particular adds to that quite a bit.
But Viper can even take his time here. Blizzard will stall a very decent amount. Has the ability to combo Blizzard with Polymorph. Can also just set up his own defensive walls with Stone Defender and see what he wants to do from there.
He's at 27 here for Viper, so one of the things that I always look for is, can I play Jaina? You know, when you're playing Control Mage, one of the things you often want to figure out is, like, is there any opportunity to play Jaina on any given turn? Though this is a matchup where Jaina is much less important because you're not really grinding them out with water elementals. You're mostly trying to disrupt their fundamental game plan with your polymorph.
Also, a little funny irony here is that Viper picked up Skulking Geist after Naturalize was being used.
Though the ability to answer the second copy of Naturalize and answer the Spell Stones is very real.
True.
That gives your opponent far lower ability to easily answer Witching Hours.
Okay. Dragon's Fury.
All right.
Without any polymorph.
Blizzard. Okay, so that that does give him a clear on everything but the Sleepy Dragon and a bit of life. Looks like Viper did not have enough time to select here.
Ooh. Oh,
that's not bad.
That's not bad. I was like, I saw like Wax Elemental, you know, and I was like, did he choose that one by accident?
Well, there's the second copy of Naturalize here.
Right. Oh,
so
wow.
This is an opportunity to potentially Witching Hour and immediately Naturalize.
Yes, and that is something that Viper was getting greedy of. You know, he was saying, I don't have to use this polymorph right now because if my opponent, you know, Witching Hours and cubes it, I can maybe deal with the second wave of threat and then polymorph the cube, but just by having the second Naturalize, Rase can get around it. And then he has 2 dead Hadronoxes in the pool, which ups his chances compared to having just a 50-50. Did Rase find light at the end of the tunnel in a matchup that's generally considered very tough?
That's Dragon Hatcher. I mean, he would have loved to have just found a cube here because that's the best opportunity.
Time waits for no one.
I mean, maybe in his mind, the Naturalize.
Overdraw too from the Naturalize.
Yes, that's what I was about to say as well.
Oh, okay, he's not going to go for it. It will be. He will be trying to add more to the pool, and this gives him more large minions and forces an answer from Viper on this particular board as well. So there's now the Dragon Hatcher, which you don't kill it, there's more big things coming out.
Yeah, in the end, Rase is just trying to develop the board in some capacity.
Although actually, this is the last dragon. There's only 1 copy of Sleepy Dragon in Race's deck, so there's no more added threat from this Dragon Hatcher if it survives through this turn.
That's fair.
Which is one of the key elements of Dragon Hatcher in a lot of matchups.
Yes.
Not only do you immediately get a dragon out, but if your opponent does not remove Dragon Hatcher immediately, it threatens to pull further stats in the board. But that threat is gone because all of the dragons are out of Race's deck.
It's a good point. So Rase trying to get value from this card while he can. I still feel a little bit you know, wary because what if my opponent has the polymorph now? You've drawn him 2 cards, but Rase saw that no polymorph came out from Viper in the past couple turns, so maybe he's making a pretty greedy play with a soft read that Viper doesn't have that polymorph, or even if he does have it, he's hesitant to play it because he's waiting for the Lich King.
And this is another opportunity that Viper can Geist, which potentially shuts down. All right,
greedy.
He's going to go with Jaina.
I like it.
I mean, this is an interesting spot because the fact that Rase doesn't have an extra dragon threat from that Dragon Hatcher, and the fact that he has a board that's actually reasonably full now, means that there's no huge threat from the Witching Hour into Naturalize. He doesn't actually get that many stats on the board because he's only filling it with 4 minions rather than, say, 7.
Well, I mean, it's still a big board that comes out from this, from the Hadronox, and he does have the branching paths. Master Oakard being drawn is useless. It actually doesn't do anything. I don't think it pulls out a single minion.
Oakard is typically, you know, the biggest single threat that you can have in Taunt Druid, but Rase has found all of the cards it would potentially pull from his deck.
Yes.
He's only playing the single copy of Dragon Hatcher even.
Time waits for no one.
Yeah, we've seen some recent builds. Oh, here we go. The Naturalize with the Hadronox. Viper kind of happy to see that the Lich King is not in the pool.
And that was very clutch. That was the first card, not the second. There's still a second copy of Polymorph available for Viper.
Look at Rase pushing the damage. But this is a desperation act if I've seen one. Viper has a guaranteed way to stop this attack. Flame Strike, not that useful anyways. And most importantly, Viper has a way to generate another Water Elemental too.
Blizzard here can just stall, and you know, obviously stalling against this huge board is quite valuable with Blizzard into Blizzard, and that Doom Pact is not so hot now because that would immediately put Viper into fatigue for next turn, but will potentially give him a little bit of insurance in later turns.
I was kind of actually saying that Flame Strike wasn't that impactful, but the Blizzard into the Flame Strike would actually been really nice in this scenario.
In particular because Rase did not get back Sleepy Dragon, so he only has 9 as the highest health among his minions on the board.
That could be why Rase is feeling a little stressed, because I'm like, man, you have a pretty good board, but he saw a Flame Strike being burned, sees Blizzard, double Wild Elementals. Okay, Spellstone does ensure that Rase has a very easy clear. Second branching pass. Where's his Carnivorous Cube? Finds it. So if his opponent clears his board, he has the Witching Hour and the Carnivorous Cube. Viper's been holding onto his Polymorphs very patiently, but with the second one in hand, feeling like maybe he feels a little bit more liberal use of it.
I think Viper almost has to go for a Polymorph here. Polymorph into Blizzard does at least shut down a Witching Hour to a 50-50. But if he does just... He also could just plain Blizzard and not clear off enough that a Hadronox is that scary.
Is it even percentages when it's like 1 copy of Hadronox? But if 2 of them died, does that mean 2 copies of Hadronox versus the 1 sheep?
I believe it is per copy. So
Okay.
so I believe that it is now because of 2 dead Hadronoxes would be a 66% chance, assuming one sheep were to die.
Right. Interesting. Viper can't get too much greedier because Rase is almost ticked out, so he knows that there's a very high chance Rase has a way to follow up this board.
I feel like the way that Viper has navigated this game has been very strange. Like, he has been holding on to these Polymorphs when using Polymorph aggressively to stop your opponent's ability to use Witching Hour is often very crucial. He has these Polymorphs, but these Polymorphs don't do that much. Once your opponent is actually just Hadronoxing.
I think
yes,
maybe
you advance with Cube, but
he just wants to simply remove everything, as opposed to try and rely on the Polymorph and the Witching Hour interaction. And also, because this board is softened up, even if his opponent's Witching Hour and cubes it, only, what, 2 minions come back?
Right, well, this particular board, I think that there's not that much of a threat of Witching Hour because of the way that the board is going to set up. But Viper's going to have to clear this board. There's just so many things in play.
Right.
So, from Race's perspective, does he just play O-Card here? 9 mana, 5/5, go.
There are ways to set up a way to kind of make your opponent have to deal with the board. You can play that Oathheart to present a threat. You can also cube Witching Hour, and if your Spellstone were strong enough, destroy it to set up multiple threats. But then the problem is you get 1 cube and 1 Hadronox back, so it's not the ideal situation. So if your opponent has double Polymorph, you're in trouble.
I actually think Race needs to upgrade his Spellstone. I don't know that he has the tools to upgrade his Spellstone enough to be able to immediately kill a cube. I think his Spellstone is at 2. I think he's hero powered twice or something like that.
It's been very...
So it's very far from being upgraded enough to actually kill a cube and spawn Hadronoxes.
And Meteor just kind of deals with most of the board here, and then Race is back at square one.
Yeah, Meteor ping here is quite strong. Clears everything but a 5/6 or 5/1 rather.
How crazy would it be if Viper wins this game without playing a single Polymorph? It just shows the amount of patience and understanding of what you need to do, and he had insurance in case they're the worst case scenario happened, which is Lich King, and your opponent be able to revive it.
Well, there is the opportunity to Witching Hour cube here.
Yeah.
That is the second Witching Hour, though. So this is your last board push.
Yeah, and he doesn't have ways to hedge against the double Polymorph with shattering his cube.
Is his Spellstone at 1 additional armor needed? Because he could theoretically hero power if that upgrades a Spellstone, then Ferocious Howl, which would upgrade the Spellstone again, which gives him the ability to Witching Hour, Cube, Spellstone the Cube, so he has 2 Hadronoxes. So it's not just answerable by a single Polymorph the next turn.
Yeah, the only problem
Granted,
with
your opponent can still have both Polymorphs left, so
yeah.
it's not really...
It's just that you fill up the board naturally, so you only have 1 Hadronox.
Right, that's true.
So
that's
it's
true.
Time waits for no one.
it would work if you had an infinite board space. Look at this. Rase spellstoning his own means to prevent the second Wild Elemental from coming out, and here comes what is most likely the final push of this game from Rase. And he says you can have Polymorph, but you don't have no more. You have no more Blizzards.
Got 2 Sleepy Dragons here,
yes.
so this is, given that he doesn't have Lich King, this is the best opportunity for him. Yeah, clearly going to Polymorph the Cube, and then
Doom Pact. No more Hadronoxes. Viper's in fatigue, but he doesn't care. He has pretty much every resource he wants anyways. Ooh, double Voodoo Doll's dying. But still has Polymorph, and he also has ways to generate threats with like Syndragosa.
Yeah, the key here, the 2 keys here are Syndragosa and Barongeddon in Viper's hand. Syndragosa allows him to generate a big minion that's going to give him a powerful clock, and then Barongeddon is burst healing. Even if he gets deep into fatigue, as long as there's any number of minions in play, the lifesteal plus Barongeddon will sustain him against that fatigue damage.
Right. So now, is there any way for Rase to turn this into a fatigue game? Let's say he doesn't play minions, plays removal only. Does he have enough armor and a life gain? I don't think so, because Viper has that Syndragosa. That's why it's so important. He saw double Voodoo Doll. Actually, he saw the remainder of the cards. So he knows, hypothetically, if he has a deck tracker both in his mind and in the screen, he would know every card in Viper's hand. Sees no double Voodoo Doll, so he knows Syndragosa is in Viper's arsenal. So he's going to play reactively to that.
There's also just Dragon Caller Alana.
That's true. Straight up. How do you deal with a Dragon Caller Alana?
Dragon Caller Alana into Barongeddon.
Or Dragon Caller Alana into death. Like, there's 35 power.
Well, even if they kill a thing, you're like, okay, well, now you killed one thing, or you played a thing, I trade into it. I play Barongeddon, my board is huge.
Right.
I gain a ton of life, no matter what I was at.
Right. I basically Reno myself back up to full life here. I still think Viper has wiggle room too, not even to play Dragon Call Alana, can play Syndragosa, ping it, get a legendary minion in hand, generate a water elemental to help sustain and also freeze my opponent's hero power from attacking me and shaving off my life. But Dragon Call Alana is also very appealing for the reasons you mentioned, just to push the issue.
I think either Syndragosa or Alana is a sequence that's going to win the game. It's just a matter of figuring out which of them is best.
Right. What does Rase have left that he has to worry about? Lich King is potentially it. So what happens if my opponent plays the Lich King? I can polymorph it, push damage with Syndragosa. I can play Dragon Caller Alana if everything goes wrong.
What's in the box?
I'm almost out of
Shares
cards.
it.
Well, he's not run out of threats.
Rase picks up a debunked card. It's not going to do anything. And because he chose not to develop anything with his previous turn, can't answer this board easily.
I don't think that's going to cut it.
Rase, hands on the head. Almost defeated before the game's even over, despite the fact that Viper is taking fatigue damage pretty significantly in the next couple turns.
It's the last card in Race's deck, a Spellstone?
Is it not the Lich King?
Oh, I think it's Lich King. I think you're right.
His last card was the Lich King. He could have cycled to it, but I think Rase doesn't want to accelerate his own fatigue. I think that is his main game plan. He hopes that he can drain the resources, get Doom Pact off of, his opponent's, or Doom Pact his opponent's board with Lich King. But with this kind of swing and this much pressure, Rase might just buckle out and give in right here.
There's all that life. You thought you might have some chance of winning that fatigue game, but that's plus 12 here. That is Lich King, but too little too late at this point.
Right, because now let's say you get the Doom Pact. Viper still has this board that you need to Doom Pact immediately, then he plays Dragon Caller Alana. Not to mention that there's a pair of legendaries in the hand, there's Stonehill Defender threat, there's the Skulking Geist. So, Rase doesn't have an answer for any of them, and if Viper sticks a single threat on the board, then he wins the fatigue rule. So I don't see a way for Rase to get out of here because things like Frostmourne get answered by just water elementals.
Or Harrison.
Or Harrison
It's even the
Jones.
Harrison.
Well, I mean,
that's going to kill him.
it would kill Viper, but it does answer the Frostmourne. You're correct.
For no one.
And I think it's so interesting to me that Rase didn't even have to worry about Witching Hour revival flips, you know? Like, he didn't have to worry about whether or not a sheep would get revived, and still, Viper had him covered many times over, just to give you a snapshot of how this matchup can get played out.
And after a grueling game, we have a 2-1 lead for Viper. That was a pretty different game than the last one we saw, Big Filmation Game 1.
Right. And very well played by Viper. I can see exactly where his head's at, never really panicked, understood what his win conditions were, and was able to be very patient with his resources. Like, hey, now I can Frost Jaina. I don't have to play. Me and you were like, let's play the Polymorph now. Why not?
Well, one of the things, as far as the dynamic of the matchup, because he got the Doom Pact from Lich King, it allowed him to play the game very differently. Because normally, you kind of need to ensure that they're unable to get value from Witching Hours. But once he got the Doom Pact from the Lich King, as he recognized, he was able to just play a defensive game where he had the answer to the cube turn that just cleared everything.
That's right. And Viper is on a path to win the series 3-1 and start off the Summer Championships with an important victory. And more importantly, perhaps finish what he started in 2016, where he made it to the championship stage. What's going to happen in game number 4? We'll find out when we return. In the meantime, get to know Viper a little bit better.
Well played!
In this video, I'm gonna profile Viper, who recently earned his spot as one of the European representatives in the 2018 HCT Summer Championship. Viper has been a part of the Hearthstone pro scene since 2016, when he earned top 8 in that year's Summer Championship, and in 2018, Viper's enjoying another breakout year, including multiple high ladder finishes, a top 8 in HCT Oslo, and most recently, his qualification for the Summer Championship. Viper's a great player to follow because he's notorious for playing the hardest decks. Today, we're going to take a look at one of his best plays from the recent HCT Summer Playoffs that earned Viper his spot in the Summer Championship. Let's hop right into Game 2 of the Summer Playoffs decider match between Viper and Fayley. Fayley's piloting Control Warlock against, you guessed it, Viper's signature Miracle Rogue. It's Viper's turn 3, and there are just so many possible plays this turn. At first glance, the best option is to coin out a 4-drop for value. But which one to play? Elven Minstrel or Faldori Strider? Well, you guessed it. Viper just plays an uncomboed SI7 agent and passes. Wait, what? This play is actually really clever. Viper understands the importance of coin and Miracle Rogue. He wants to keep this card up as long as possible for a critical turn. And he can just play Faldori Strider next turn. But what about Elven Minstrel? Viper realizes the scariest card Fayley can play next turn is Mountain Giant. And so playing SI7 now is just a better answer. If Fayley does play Mountain Giant, then Viper can go 4-mana minion, coin, Cold Blood, and use his dagger to kill it. And if Fayley doesn't play Mountain Giant, then Viper gets to save the coin and instead play an on-curve Faldori Strider. In fact, Fayley does have the Giant, which is perfectly answered by Viper just as he planned. It's incredible game knowledge like this that earned Viper his spot in the Summer Championship. This has been our profile of Viper for the HCT Summer Championship. Please join me in wishing him the best of luck in the tournament. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, brought to you by the coaches at Gamer Sensei, please visit playhearthstone.com/esports for more of the Well Played series and all things Hearthstone esports.
Well played!
Welcome back, everybody, to the match that kicks off the Summer Championship. Viper is up 2-1 over Rase, and you guys got a glimpse of why we consider Viper to be a very strong player and absolutely worthy of being in the championship and on the HGG team. Looking forward to see how well Germany can do this year with a very good roster. In the meantime, Rase, also on the HGG team, looking to see if he can dig himself out of a hole and beat the even Warlock twice. Going to turn to his Taunt Druid first to start things off.
This is actually a deck that Rase is not playing, the Even Warlock. It's one of the most popular decks in the entire field, but was one that Rase chose to omit from his lineup. He felt like it was a deck that could potentially be targeted and could potentially be vulnerable, and it's what he's going to have to win his uphill climb against here against Viper.
That's right, and now that Rase has the Taunt Druid, it does have a a pretty good chance of answering the Even Warlock. Has so many threats to answer. It turns out Sleepy Dragon just pretty much solos any minion that Viper can put out. And if Rase gets Master Okark and Hadronox, there's no easy clear. They don't have Lord Godfrey. They don't have Twisting Nether. Some of these old, classic Warlock control tools to answer big boards. They have, Hellfire Defile, which might kill a minion.
There's Master Okark. So Rase, he has Wild Growth, he has the Master. He's just looking for more ramp if he can find a Nourish.
I mean, he also has Oaken Summons in the second with Golem, which also makes sure that it's a higher chance for Hadronox to get pulled. And he has the Spear Singer Umbra, so actually he has a guaranteed Ironwood Golem into the Master Okark Hadronox.
Yeah, so that'll be a powerful Hadronox when it, or rather powerful Master Okark when it does happen. That's a Skulking Geist for Viper though, which is pretty crucial because it can shut down the Naturalizes from Rase, one of the tech inclusions, along with the little snail here, the Gastropod. This makes a 2-drop kill whatever it is that Rase gets out from a Oaken Summons. And a nice drop from Rase here with the Spellstone as well. Timed perfectly with the Oaken Summons to upgrade it.
I love it. Stubborn Gastropod, fantastic card in Arena. I'm sure, when you dive into the format, you see that card, Stone Still Basilisk, all these poisonous minions are really annoying, but I always wonder, do they have room for Construct because poison is such a strong effect? And because 2-mana cards are very weak right now from rotation, cards like Amani Berserker and Stubborn Gastropod are being played. It's really cool.
One of the big things with Gastropod is just the way that it interacts with other Warlock decks. You basically want to be spending your early turns playing giant threats, and you can't do that if your opponent just plays a 2-cost poisonous snail.
Yeah.
You're just gonna get traded into the Nourish draw for Rase here. So this is just gonna be Nourish
Coin Master
Okark next turn.
Oh gosh. I mean, Rase is kind of like counting just to make sure, but I mean, we've all been in this position. Wild Growth, Oaken Summons, Nourish, Master Okark.
The thing is, he doesn't have to do it either. He only has one dead minion for his Hadronox right now. Obviously, Master Okark will make an enormous board as well. He could theoretically just play Lich King into natural Okark, but probably just flooding the board with everything Okark generates and saying, okay, well, if you kill my Hadronox, you can't deal with the rest of it.
Yeah, I would say so, considering that Dragon Hatcher will pull out at least a 4/8 minion, and then you just have so many stats. Viper picks up a pretty critical card, though. Mountain Giant is a way to try and answer the board state. Does have room to life tap as well. Could also coin. Oh, it doesn't have the coin, excuse me. I thought that the file was a coin. So I was like, coin out Skulking Geist, but no, just Mountain Giant.
And this got to be pretty scary for Viper. He's clearly wants to try to put as much pressure as he can on the board here, but Rase with tons of ramp. It was all just waiting for this game. The last game he had none of it, now he just gets all of it. One of the things that Viper needs to be cognizant of is the threat of Naturalize as a removal spell. So you don't necessarily just want to tap Giant.
You're right, you're right.
The sort of automatic play is, oh, I can tap Giant, but how valuable is the life tap here versus get the potential overdraft Naturalize at the same time? One of the things that's pretty crucial is actually getting your life total down too. So you don't necessarily just want to.
Okay. So it's a halfway play.
Yeah.
Dump his hand so he can keep life tapping. Spread it out so that way he's better against Naturalize and have his hand size check.
Well, it's time for Master O card here.
Onward, friends!
No regard for
no
regard for human life, basically. Got a Primordial Drake. So now Viper needs to deal with all of this. You know, the Spellbreaker can shut down the Death Rattle of the Hadronox here, but then he still needs to figure out a way to deal with the Dragon Hatcher, or Dragon Hatcher, before it actually brings out yet another gigantic taunt. So this is basically the ultimate draw here, the nut draw for Rase here with the O cart. Now Viper trying to figure out, is there any way to beat it?
I mean, there's also a lot of merit into not silencing the Hadronox because they can just, you know, cube it anyways, and then you're like, oh wow, I spent my silence. A lot of times I find a lot of use for Spellbreakers after they cube. But then the problem is if they've cubed and revived with Witching Hour, most likely the board's so big that you can't deal with it anyway. So it's like
the first half.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation, to say the least. So Viper silencing the Hadronox, but leaving up the Dragon Hatcher, kind of saying, all right, if you have the cube and you have ways to deal with my board, you got me. Oh boy. Now, at the same time, Rase can take a lot from this information. His opponent didn't have really good removal tools. His opponent didn't have much to do with his board. He can shave the board down significantly and play Lich King.
I wonder.
There's also just, you know, there is the Spirit Singer cube here if he really wants it, to just get some more Hadronox.
Right, but then Dragon Hatcher
actually
will it even pull a minion at that point?
Right. Well, I actually think that if he Spirit Singer cubes, he'd get the cube getting the Hadronox. I don't even know that he'd get anything back from the Hadronox.
From the Hadronox, it'd just be 2 Hadronoxes straight up, so it just might as well cube, I guess. But you still get decent board presence, and then you have branching paths. So as long as you stick a single board, you can push damage and end the game. There's also just the Lich King Spellstone to clear up the board a little bit. I don't mind that. I think it's really clean.
Yeah, you do end up getting the Lich King in the pool before you actually get to use your Hadronox Revival, which makes it much more powerful. Right. You're ensuring that you're getting a dragon from the Dragon Hatcher, and now you're like, okay, I have enough aggression that I'm gonna attack your face and get that that life settle down.
This is a board where you wish you still had things like Godfrey and whatnot, because, I mean, obviously you can't play because it's Even Warlock, but it's just, in general, Even Warlock sacrifices so many of those late-game control tools to opt for better tempo plays early on, and Viper has a great turn available to him on paper with Mountain Giant Hook Reaver, but doesn't do anything to save the board.
One of the problems with the Even Warlock deck is it's just eminently fair. You know, it does powerful things, but they're powerful things that are just powerful because they're efficient. It doesn't do crazy things like, oh, I'm going to put 40 mana worth of cards into play with a single 9 mana card.
Have you played the Wisp, Snowflipper, Penguin, Sea Giant Even Warlock? Derek and Sato are laughing in the corner because they're getting ready for the next series. But they saw it yesterday where I played Mountain Giant, Hook Reaver, Snowflipper, Penguin, Sea Giant. And you said it can't play 44 your stats. Ha!
That's not the deck Viper's playing. And for good reason, because he's competing in the championship.
Does Double Defile save him here? I don't think so. So he just ends up playing Hook Reaver. In his mind, he's alive, but we all know.
Yeah, this is...
Rase has this game. And that's going to be a tied series going to Game 5.
I was actually more excited, and this is just the way that I look at these games. I'm like, ooh, he can Umbra and Cube. It's like, oh wait, he has lethal. How boring.
Well, he can Umbra Cube and still beat him.
He can have so much cool stuff in play, but instead he won. What a jerk.
Yeah, I mean, if he wants to drag out this game for maximum exposure, because he knows a lot of South American fans are tuning in to support him, I'd go for that.
Well, now he gets the exposure. Now he gets to play Shield Bearer Taunt Warrior.
That's right.
That's what I've been excited about this whole time.
That's right. He's the only player to bring Warrior, and Quest Warrior is a deck that people were very much in love with at the beginning of the new meta once the patch hit, and then people quickly turned on and said, you know what, it's not that good. So we'll see if Rase can put his money where his mouth is with his warrior deck.
Yeah, I think a big part of what hurt Rase here is that he got into a group that has mostly like control, anti-control type lineups, where he was hoping to get paired with people like Turna or Killin All Day, who have the aggro lineups where this warrior deck can shine. It's fantastic against Odd Paladin, fantastic against Token Druid, but not quite as good against the even Warlock he's going to have to go up against just now.
That's right. So going up in game number 5, we'll have whether or not the Even Warlock can take a really good matchup, and I'm not sure what's going to exactly happen here, Kibler. So we'll find out when in just a second here. And we have the popular decks coming up to show you guys on screen about what's actually happening. Apologies, I thought we were going to a break. No breaks. We're going to show the most popular representation, and that Even Warlock, 70% of the field. And you have to kind of wonder if the field is so much concentrated on Warlock and Druid, is bringing a lineup targeting the right call here, given that it's a group stage and you kind of know who you're going to play against.
Yeah, this is an interesting tournament because of exactly that. The fact that players knew not only their group, but their first round opponent before they even submitted deck lists. So if you have reason to believe that you have an opponent who has particular tendencies, like for instance, Viper is very likely to play Miracle Rogue. He's been known to play that deck for quite a while, clearly his favorite deck. Should you be playing a deck that targets that, especially if you think there's a decent chance that the rest of the field will have a deck like that as well?
That's right. So the important thing to note is about how wide the field can be. Let's look at the class representation and just show you guys that all 9 classes are represented here in a championship, and you could make an argument that the bottom representation should be higher and the higher should be lower, right? You can just say that Paladin is a very dominant deck on ladder, and a lot of people feel like it's one of the best decks in the metagame, and yet it's the second least represented class here. And at the same time, people are saying Priest, because it's underrepresented and because of the way the field panned out, might be a deck that performs well.
Yeah, there's some interesting evolution of the metagame. We saw Hunter Ace won the core stop in Seoul, playing a very aggressive lineup, and then people reacted to that and played control lineups that were targeting aggro, and then were successful with those. And now the next step is, well, I'm going to play anti-control lineups targeting those control decks, which I think will be popular. Well, now I'm going to play Hunter Ace's decks.
Yeah.
Hey, that could be really good too.
Well, he played a classic mid-range Hunter with a Spellstone secret package, and it was really interesting to see because, one, like we said, Hunter Ace is really known for being a control player, but also people just kept dying to mid-range Hunter, and you're like, I thought this was kind of like a joke, like in the sense that people always say mid-range Hunter preys on unsuspecting and new metas, but it never really sees anything substance past like the second day of ladder. And yet he brought to a tournament the only person to bring mid-range Hunter and won that entire field. Very impressive. And now we kind of see a position where Hunter, once again, is a really powerful spot against some of those control lineups, but very weak against those Odd Paladin Even Shaman.
Yeah, they're very different decks too. I think that's that one thing, just that graphic we just saw speaks volumes about the diversity in this metagame. Yes, there's a lot of Taunt Druids, yes, there's a lot of Even Warlocks, but this is, I think, the first championship that I can remember where we have not only every class represented, but in a pretty reasonable distribution as well.
Right, of archetypes and play styles. Let's go into Warrior versus Warlock. This is the last game of our series. Thank you for being patient as we go into Game 5. Kibler, I want to bring up something that happened before the expansion. I kind of put myself out there and made a few bold predictions. And one of them was that Azalina's Soul Thief would be played on this HCT stage. I didn't expect it to be this soon, because I thought that it's one of those things where like maybe as the metagame develops, you might flesh out the decks a little bit more. So I was thinking maybe later in the year or something. But geez, Rase has Azalina's Soul Thief and Battle Rage to refill his hand once he's done playing Shield Bearer. Somewhere in the world, right now it's sneezing right now.
I actually really like this take on Control Warrior. I can't say as to its effectiveness, I haven't played Shield Bearer or Controlled Warrior, but conceptually I really like it because it recognizes that my plan in these like long controlling games is just the quest.
Right.
And all I want to do against control decks is finish my quest as quickly as possible. We talked when Taunt Warrior first got popular about taking cheap taunts off of Stonehill Defender. Rase has done one better. He's like, I'm not going to just have to take the cheap taunts off Stonehill Defender. They're just in my deck.
Yeah.
So it gives him some very minor protection against aggressive decks, but mostly just allows him to get Sulfuros online as quickly as possible and start throwing those fireballs.
Yes, you know, there's a very high correlation to the sooner you finish your quest, the higher your win percentage is. So the logic is just get it done quicker. That being said, Rase does not have those early game taunts. Some people went so far that they put Wax Elemental in deck. I don't know if you want to go that far, considering that you don't get like the easy Battle Rage activations with the Divine Shield. But, you know, I can respect a man who understands his win condition and tries to go for it. Now, Viper has some of the best threats to answer Race's fast quest. He has double Mountain Giant in the hand here. And if he life taps, he can play it next turn.
Yeah, and from Race's perspective, he needs to try to really line up his removal correctly against the threats that Viper generates while advancing his quest. So he's going to need to figure out how best to manage specifically Brawl. We see a copy of it in his hand. And Viper is going to be trying to navigate, okay, you know, how can I present enough threats without being overcommitted, because that is exactly what Race is hoping to punish with that.
So Defender, a really important card here. Again, showing some of the differences that Rase has in his quest war compared to some of the lists you might see on the ladder.
And we were talking about that Azalina Soul Thief we see on the screen there. The whole idea is that the rest of the deck is just taunts and removal.
Right.
And then, okay, if you play against controlling decks, you have the ability to reload with a single copy of Azalina in your deck. They have a huge hand of, say, their own removal, because they don't have great removal targets because you just have a bunch of taunt minions. And if you steal those late in the game, you know, that alongside the quest can carry you through just about anything.
Rase unhappy to see the first Mountain Giant, and just like you said, he has that Brawl, but not really much besides it for removal. He can stall, though, and that might be good enough, because if he plays enough taunts to get in the way of Viper, Viper might extend more onto the board. Brawl can get higher value. Has a second Stonehill Defender to dig a little deeper, because his mana spend will be awkward regardless of what he does. Could also play Tar Creeper to put a little bit more stats on the board.
Out of my
That's a Wax Elemental. Big Waxy.
He's going to have to be the biggest of Waxies in order to turn this matchup around. This is a tough spot to go up because Viper has a lot more threats after this first Mountain Giant.
Yes, but Rase does have 2 Brawls. And if Viper does just load up second Mountain Giant here, you know, there's the opportunity for Rase to even, you know, not next turn play a taunt, but, you know, down the line play taunts and Brawl, or just Brawl immediately. He can even just play the Wax Elemental right now.
It's true.
And maximize his mana. And this means, okay, well, if Viper is trying to, you know, just load up with another Mountain Giant, because he's not, that also just absorbs 2 Mountain Giant hits. It's, you know, it's a Divine Shield. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. So I guess he does put Wax Elementals in his deck, right? And the important thing, too, is Rase has his quest effectively prepared. He has 6, but the Phantom Militia can be copied twice on turn 6. And that's as quick as it could be. Although he won't be able to play both his Stonehill Defenders and his Phantom Militia, so he's at least 4 turns away from having his quest.
I believe turn 8 is when he would first get an activation of the hero power. But that's, I mean, that's pretty
so fast.
Right, and that is assuming he doesn't use his mana for anything else in that period. And if Viper does play another Mountain Giant here, for instance, you know, he's going to have to.
Viper has the ability to coin out Sun Fury Protector and force the taunts to prevent Rase from being able to do any extra damage. Taunt's only 1 Giant too. It's a very nice choice to just, you know, give Rase less options to double remove.
Well, this is a little bit interesting, the choice to coin out the Sun Fury, because it does make Brawl better. There are now 3 small minions on the board and 2 large ones, whereas it was a 50-50 prior to that.
Yeah, 50-50 for the Mountain Giant to survive, but 60% chance that one of his minions survives. I mean, I like the taunt because it prevents a double execute scenario, but I think
he just executes attacks.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. So
I'm trying to figure out what this does exactly.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Frees up his hand space. We can life tap.
Yes, that is something that, you know, certainly potentially relevant. But I think that between the threat of Brawl and the fact that you're not actually protecting against double execute, I'm a little bit curious as to the goal of this play. He could have just life tapped too. Oh no, he couldn't. Never mind, because there's you have the coin.
Right. It was too much space.
Just kidding.
I don't think it's bad. Plus, it answers the wax elemental a little bit better. So, overall, don't hate it. Skulking Geist. Sometimes pretty useful. There's a handful of warrior decks that run like Whirlwind and whatnot. Only one Shield Slam in Race's deck, so not going to be super impactful. So this is a pretty deep extension into Brawl, but there's a pretty decent chance that Viper has a substantial minion stay.
Well, I think that what Viper's plan may be here is essentially just trying to break up the opportunity that Race has to spend his mana on actually developing top minions for his quest. Because if he doesn't just maximize pressure, if he doesn't set himself up with the small minion to break Divine Shield, which is going back, that's kind of what the Sun Fury did, right? It prevents the Divine Shield from actually presenting 16 damage. It only absorbs the 1 hit and then the smaller hit, and then the Giants actually get to get in. Right. So the way that Viper is playing this allows him to keep the pressure on and force Race to not just be able to develop without taking a lot of damage.
So Viper, again, in this position where he kind of recognizes that he wants to push as much damage as possible, but how much does he extend onto the board? He has Skulking Geist to shut down a Shield Slam opportunity, push 8 damage because everything trades on board very nicely. It is 5 minions for your opponent to brawl, but if they're brawling, they're most likely not developing the quest. Even if they do have like a shield bearer thrown into the mix, they can't hit you immediately, so you can follow up development.
So next turn, Race has the opportunity to play the Armorer plus Brawl, and then the following turn can play Tar Creeper, complete the quest, Sulfuros, Hero Power. I think that's the sequence that he's kind of creating here, which interestingly,
wow, this is so smart, utilizing Defile as a way to develop, reduce the size of his board, and push an extra 8 damage. Fantastic spot here from Viper.
And Race has been focused on developing those top minions, trying to protect himself with those bodies that allowed Viper to get that clear with the Defile and push 16 damage there.
That was a great play, and I mean, it even threatens lethal because Race was like so focused on his quest. He even forewent a Brawl that had decent odds for him to try and develop his quest because he recognized how important it is to get the quest done.
We're definitely seeing Dry Whisker Brawl this turn. It's been 24, and there's 2 good outcomes for Race here. One, obviously, his minion surviving is the best. The other being both.
Oh, the healthy Giant.
Yeah, that's the worst case scenario. Now there is an unexecutable 8/8 on the board.
Right. And Twilight Drake being picked up. Now, Viper, again, well aware that there's the possibility of finishing the quest in hero power, so this Giant might be defunct anyways, but the Twilight Drake looks to be a 4/9, and it would survive if the hero power landed on the dragon. He also has a way to make the taunts complicated with the second Sun Fury Protector as well. He could taunt up, say, the Giant forces opponent to hero power first, and then swing the weapon, but there's a 1 in 4 chance that would happen exactly that way. Could also just taunt the Drake straight up, force the but I think I like this one a little bit better.
This is potentially another opportunity for Race to just brawl. He could brawl and then play Tar Creeper.
Yeah.
And that gives him, one very good result in the. He can also just play Tar Creeper and brawl, which gives him a little bit different opportunities. But
Iron Beak Owl Brawl? I don't know. It's tough. The Tar Creeper is what, 1 in 4 to survive versus you just play it and then Mountain Giant or Twilight Drake has a very good chance of surviving, then you play Tar Creeper. Might be asking for a lot here. Maybe Race's chance of winning the game does rely on him winning a 1 in 4 brawl.
Well, if he brawls in this place Tar Creeper, the only bad outcome, like really bad outcome, is Giant living. So he's gonna go for it again. See if the Giant remains the bare knuckle brawler.
Oh no!
And it is. That Giant has won a couple of serious street fights.
Yeah, that Mountain Giant's not to be not to be messed with, rather.
Omir, and that is a excellent follow-up. Lich King. Now 2 8/8s. Death Coil is a big hit here for Viper. It potentially represents lethal damage. Death Coil plus Hellfire in either of these minions. If either of these minions connects next turn, Hellfire plus Death Coil gives Viper lethal damage if Rase does not hero power.
Well, Rase has a clear opportunity if he Blood Razors, Sulfuros, hero powers. Goes down to 8 life.
And then he dies. And then he dies to Death Coil Blood Razor.
Well, he
Death Coil
doesn't
Hellfire.
know that.
Right.
But
and
I think
that gives him a 50-50.
He could just hide behind the... he could hide behind the corner sentry. Sorry, it took a while for me to remember it. So I just need to call it Raptor Girdle.
Yeah, that doesn't let him. He could Sulfuros use the hero power corner sentry. Yeah, it looks like he's going for that clear, like you mentioned. He's gonna get some bad news.
Yeah.
Either Lich King lives. You know, he still has to win a 50-50 for this to even give him a chance of survival. And even then, there's lethal in Viper's hand. He thinks he is safe, but we know better.
That's right, Hellfire and Death Coil will end the series. Viper takes it against Rase and sends the Brazilian player to a lower bracket. An excellent series, immaculately played by Viper, and I gotta say, he is looking mighty fine in this kickoff match.
Yeah, and that was a grueling series for both players. I think that was almost 2 hours even of gameplay there. So definitely a tough road for both of them, and it is Viper who emerges victorious.
Yeah, gotta tip the cap. Viper did some really nice plays, and Rase in the end was unfavored to start things off. So no upset yet, but Rase still has hope in that lower bracket as Viper will play the winner of Xiaoti and Tonsoku.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, though, Rase a very uphill climb at this point because both players have tough lineups for him to overcome.
That's right. Xiaoti and Tonsoku have control killers, and Viper again will look to play either of those players. Cora is waiting with Viper for a few words on his victory.
Thank you very much, Frodam. I'm joined by Viper here on the stage, the winner of the first series of the day, taking it in game number 5 versus Rase. Things did come down to the wire just a little bit, but he managed to pull it off. First off, congratulations, man. Very, very well played there. Now, you were slightly favored lineup-wise going into that series, but where was your head at going into that series, really, first off, even though you were a little bit favored?
Going into the series, especially going into this series, my head was kind of just don't queue the wrong matchup. Just don't happen your rogue against mage. Then matchup turned out well. Like game 1 was really fortunate for me. So after that, I was kind of happy and everything. I don't know. My mind was fine. I was like, yeah, you can do this. It's gonna be okay, and that's it.
Well, it certainly did turn out quite well for you as you did end up winning that series, but I know it's got to be tough taking it match by match. But how are you feeling right now, knowing you've won your first series of the day and things hopefully will continue on well for you from here on out?
I don't know. I'm feeling great. I'm excited. I won my first match. It's one more match for top 8, like one more win for top 8. So I'm looking forward to it. I cannot see anything. I'm just happy. I'm just so happy I won.
Awesome. Well, congratulations again. Final question. Your next match will be versus the winner of Xiaoti and Tonsoku. Have you looked into that matchup at all, and do you have a preference for which player you'd like to play against?
I've looked at the decks and lineups and practiced against them, obviously, already, but they are very similar. I mean, the only difference is Tonsoku is playing Taunt Druid and Xiaoti is playing Spiteful Druid. And the thing about them, too, is I think in general, I favor playing against Xiaoti because Spiteful Druid is worse than Taunt Druid against my lineup. But like every other deck that Xiaoti brought is tagged better towards beating my deck. So I don't know, it's basically a coin flip. I don't mind facing any of them.
All right, well, you're doing pretty well so far. Congratulations again. The winner of the first match of the day, Viper, in a 3-2 victory over Rase. But we've got 5 more matches coming your way today. And of course, we've got to find out who Viper will be playing against for their top 8 qualification match. But let's throw it back over to the desk and get our second match of the day underway.